The Company Militia is the first specialization for the Swordsman class. Uh, the Swordsman is the replacement for the Winchester class, which is now instead the second specialization of the Swordsman. The Company Militia is a frontline damage dealer, and its main purpose is to apply damage over time effects to the enemy. This means that your burst potential is going to be quite low. However, you will be able to deal a steady, sustained damage to the enemy. Since the specialization is a bit slow to build its damage potential, this means that you need to be able to stay alive longer than your average damage dealer. So the Company Militia has access to higher defensiveness than the regular damage dealer. So, well, if I were to compare it simply to the Winchester specialization, the Winchester has access to very high burst. But the trade-off of this is that Winchester is very squishy, and Free Company Militia is basically the other way around. So, if you enjoy playing something which is rather steady, solid, with continuous sustained damage, this will most likely be something you will enjoy. The Swordsman class mechanic is rather similar to the original Witch Hunter class, meaning you have abilities that build accusation points, and then you have abilities that spend these points, so execute abilities. However, there are a few differences on Interbellum that are important to notice. Firstly, the accusation points are called combo points instead, and they are applied to the target, not to yourself. And the second important difference is that these combo points that you apply on a target can be spent by any swordsman. So if you have in a group a Witch Hunter and a Free Company Militia, well, maybe the Witch Hunter is going to build combo points, and you, as a Free Company Militia, will be able to spend these points in order to fuel your own execute. So this can create rather interesting synergies if you manage to properly coordinate between swordsmen. I am not going to get into all the details of how this spec works, as it would take a bit too long, but however, I'm still going to detail the unique defensiveness of Free Company Militia. I'm going to start off with Vigilance, and this one is a basic defensive cooldown. Whenever you use it, you will be taking far less damage. However, you will also be dealing far less damage. This is something which is excellent to use whenever you are disarmed, for example, or if you can anticipate a stun, perhaps. As I've said, this one is rather basic, so on Interbellum, a fair amount of melee specializations have access to Vigilance. This is a pretty standard ability, then what makes the defensiveness of Company Militia unique is these two additional defensives cooldown that you have. And so this one, Seal of Wilhelm, is going to greatly increase your armor, but is also going to greatly lower your magical resistances. So basically, you do not want to use this whenever you are being targeted by a magic damage dealer, but instead you will want to use this if you are focused by a non-magic damage dealer, which is also dealing direct damage. So why am I saying direct damage? Because on Interbellum, the purpose of armor is not the same than what it is on Return of Reckoning. On Return of Reckoning, you have these 3 magical damage, and they have their resistance tied to them, but for physical damage, you only have one type of it, and it is only reduced through armor. Interbellum has also three types of physical damage to somehow mirror the magical ones. If I were to take example from my own abilities, I have Torment. This one is single target damaging ability, which is going to deal piercing damage to the target. So whenever I use this to an enemy, it will be countered by piercing resistance. Torment is also direct damage, so basically everything which is not a damage of a time effect is considered as direct. So when I use Torment on an enemy, it is both piercing resistance, which is calculated, but also the armor, which is taken into account in order to lower the damage that I will be dealing to the enemy. However, if I use a fervor, this one is a damage over time effect. It deals ichor damage. So this will be countered by ichor resistance. However, since this is a damage over time effect, it is not countered by armor. It bypasses armor. I mentioned that most of your toolkit as a free company militia is based on a damage over time effect. This means that most of your abilities are going to bypass armor, and so only the base physical resistance will be taken into account. This is how, despite having a fair amount of defensiveness, you can still end up dealing very decent damage. To get back to the Seal of Wilhelm, as you can see when I use it, I greatly lower my magical resistances, but my armor is greatly increased. So I need to use it whenever I am being focused by physical base direct damage dealer, example a Black Orc. This will be extremely helpful against that sort of DPS or tank. There's also the Seal of the Northman, which is basically the opposite of Seal of Wilhelm. It lowers your armor but greatly increases your magical resistances, as you can see. You do not want to use this against the Black Orc, otherwise you will be helping the Black Orc at killing you. You want to use this only magical base against a magical base damage dealer. If you find that these downsides of the seals are a bit too hard to play with at first, there's a tactic that you can unlock when building your specialization, which is called Seal Master. And this tactic will basically remove the downside of the seals. So you will be able to use Seal of Wilhelm without lowering your magical resistances, and Seal of the Northman without reducing your armor. This will make it easier to manage your defensive cooldown. This is mostly useful, for example, if you still do not know exactly what types of damage each spec on the enemy side is dealing. Now that I mentioned these two defensive cooldowns, I'm going to mention two specific passive of the Free Company Militia. You have protection from heresy, and this one is tied to the seal mechanic. So whenever you will be using one of your seals, you will be you will obtain stacks of enhanced chances to dodge. The purpose of dodge on Interbellum not exactly the same as what it is on Return of Reckoning. So on Return of Reckoning you have block and parry, dodge and disrupt. And on Interbellum these four stats are combined into a single one, which is dodge. So dodge works against any type of attack, physical, range, magical. It also works against controls. This stats is as such the strongest defensive stats that you can unlock. However, it is very hard to increase it through your gear and specialization. This is purposefully made, and being able to, whenever you use a seal, you will see I use a seal, and suddenly my chances to dodge went from 10% to 70%. This is extremely high. And this is obviously extremely helpful to allow you to not get bursted down by the enemy, and at the same you can also use it to anticipate a control that will be applied to you. So this is extremely helpful with a bit of luck. And now that I mentioned this first passive, the second one that I wanted to mention is Elbow to a Balance. This one is going to, whenever you will be taking damage, is going to gradually grant you stacks of increased armor, and also apply to the enemy stacks of reduced armor. The enemies only the ones that are surrounding you. So this is really a passive which encourages you to remain in the middle of the combat, as it will make you tougher over time while making weaker the enemy. This will also be helpful for the other damage dealers of your team that are dealing direct damage, as their damage is going to be is going to be countered by the armor of the enemy, but since you will be lowering the armor of the enemy, you will be helping them dealing more damage. So this is an excellent passive, and is also well, an additional way to make you way tougher than your average damage dealer. And so these are your two abilities and two passives that will greatly help you survive. And now I'm going to simply show how it works in actual combat. First clip, I am facing two Black Orcs. As you can see, this one has a shield, so this one is a tank, and this one is using an axe in each hand, and as such is a damage dealer. The sub-mechanic of Black Orcs allows them to swap to this two-handed axe that they have in the back, and which allows them to deal very high burst damage. This means that even a tank Black Orc can sometimes, when you're using his two-handed axe, deal very high burst damage. So what I do is I use Seal of Wilhelm to increase my armor very early. The cooldown is only 30 seconds, so I have a chance to reuse it later in the fight if I use it instantly. Using Potion. Now I'm using Vigilance, while I try to apply dots on the enemy. I do not take too much damage by doing so, while doing so. So you can see I'm rather tanky, and now they are going to swap to the Earthbreaker, however. See that the Earthbreaker dies very quickly. So without the assistance of a tank, an Earthbreaker is going to die much faster than a free Company Militia. I have Seal of Wilhelm, which is ready again. So they waste a lot of time trying to kill me, but they still end up doing so. However, I managed to get a kill, and this is something that you end up doing rather frequently as a free Company Militia. You still die at some point, but you will be taking someone down with you, which is rather fun to do. I mentioned regarding the Earthbreaker, so the player I think was playing this class for the first time, which obviously does not help, and also the player was running full offensive set, I think, which also does not help at survival. So you can be more defensive as an Earthbreaker, which is perfectly possible. It's just that you will never be as defensive than the Free Company Militia will. However, the Free Company Militia, you never deal as much burst damage than an Earthbreaker. So round 2 against these two Black Orcs. I'm going to try to apply dots on the two Black Orcs at the same time this time. Which is a bit is a bit stuttery here. It's not easy to build your dots on multiple opponents, but if you manage to do so, I use my disarm a bit too late to try to save this Earthbreaker, unfortunately. If you manage to build dots on multiple opponents, you end up dealing very high damage per second, in fact. Vigilance to protect myself, while I use a health potion and reapply damage over time effect to the enemy. I could do a better job at using a disarm here. Seal of Wilhelm again, disarm, but the disarm is a bit late, unfortunately. Last clip that I have against these two Black Orcs. Vigilance. He uses his turn to burst me down, however I have Vigilance up, so I did not die. The Vigilance saved me. I'm using Seal of Wilhelm. And I think the Black Orc used his knockback so that I would waste my stacks of increased dodge. As you can see, if you manage to fight someone long enough and apply the various damage over time effect that you have access to, the enemy can end up dying rather quickly, as you just saw. So it needs a bit of time to build this up, but if you manage to do so, you have very high damage potential with the specialization.